Tonight, I should be talking about Sholom. What I've seen so far, how wonderfully welcoming y'all have been, and much, much more. I should be talking about immigrants, giving a rousing sermon speaking up for them and their needs. I should be talking about the LGBTQ community, how threatened so many queer individuals feel right now, especially trans folks. Honestly, there are probably about 30 sermons I should give tonight, but you're welcome, I will give just the one. There's a Korean saying that goes, "The arm bends inward." It means that it's human to place first priority on tending to one's own community. To that end, it is worth recognizing how momentous this moment is. I have to choose amongst all the sermons I ought to give, and really, I should be talking about the ceasefire and hostages being released in Israel. Let me go ahead and clarify from the outset, Israel and the deal are complicated. The former is, as we all know, imperfect. However, Israel is home to close to half of world Jewry. What happens there affects us, and we simply don't get to be apathetic about the fate of half of our fellow Jews. The latter, the ceasefire deal, is hardly simple either. A ceasefire with Hamas, a group whose charter vows to destroy Israel, is a lot to parse. Add to that the tough emotions most of us feel seeing convicted terrorists released in the swap to free the hostages. These also are sermons worth giving, but they're not for tonight. Why is that? Let me explain with some Talmud. Imagine the following. There's a one-lane road, and two groups are approaching it from opposite sides. From one direction, you have a funeral procession, a line of cars all on their way to the cemetery to say goodbye to a loved one. From the other direction, you have a group of folks all on their way to celebrate a friend's wedding at a banquet hall. The two groups reach the one-way section of the road at the same time from opposite ends. Who should yield to whom? Jewish tradition actually, of course, has an answer for this hypothetical. We've got an answer for everything. The Talmud Tractate Ketubot says that if a funeral procession and a wedding procession meet, and one must make way for the other, the funeral procession yields to the wedding procession. Let me say that again, just in case you may have misheard. The mourners take a back seat, and the wedding goes first. Why? Because according to the Talmud, we do not defer celebration. And even though there is much to scrutinize, to mourn, and to process about our world, for tonight, let's rejoice in the pure joy of the fact that several members of our people are finally home. That this is the first Shabbat that Romi Gonen, Emily Damari, and Doron Steinbrecher will spend with their families in nearly a year and a half. That many more of our brothers and sisters who have sat kidnapped in underground dungeons for 475 days as of today, God willing, will soon be coming home. That's a cause for celebration. This is our wedding procession, so to speak, and to it we must yield. It's work, I admit it, to feel elated in a time like this, after such a long, hard slog, while our country roils, while we know there's still so much suffering in Israel and amongst Palestinians, while we may yet still be in the midst of the longest war in Israel's history, that is true, it's already the longest in Israel's history, which makes this, by the way, the longest war a Jewish state has fought in 2,000 years. When the ceasefire deal was inked, I began working on a piece of calligraphy, one meant to incorporate the first name of every individual killed in Israel in an act of terror on and since October 7th, 2023. Doing this has been almost unbearably difficult. In those names, for me, and I suspect for you too, are essentially everyone I have known or ever met. All of my siblings, all of my teachers, every camp counselor, every friend from Jewish day school, every child with whom I've worked at a Sunday school, they're all in those names. There are Avis, there are Aris, there are Addies, there are Ashers, David, Chen, Michaels, Samuels, every name in there representing a story lost. And in this still, we yield to the wedding procession. The Talmud actually says in a different place, Ein lecha mitzvah gdola k'pidyon shvuyim. We have no mitzvah, no commandment greater than the redeeming of captives. And so, along with the rest of the Jewish world, it is our duty, a mitzvah, to rejoice the redemption of these captives, the reunion of our fellows with their families. I want to introduce you to those who are now back with us. Romi Gonen was kidnapped at the Nova Music Festival. She's a 24-year-old dancer who studied dance for 12 years. That's half of her life. Her mother posted to her Facebook that she was taking, quote and translate, by the way, a moment to breathe it in and believe that it was all real. Romi herself posted after getting out, there is life after death. Emily Damari, a 28-year-old dual Israeli-British citizen, was kidnapped from her home in Kibbutz Kfar Aza, one of the hardest hit places in Israel. Emily loves Ed Sheeran and soccer. In her case, the Premier League football club, am I going to pronounce this right? Tottenham Hotspurs, is that it? Her mother on Instagram shared after Emily's release that she was, quote, the happiest person in the world. She said that, and again, this is a quote, she was finally able to give Emily the hug that she had been dreaming of. Doron Steinbrecher, a veterinary nurse, was also kidnapped at Kibbutz Kfar Aza. Posting on Instagram, her family said, after an unbearable 471 days, our beloved has finally returned to our arms. Her sister, Yamit Ashkenazi, posted this photo with her and wrote, my sunbeam has returned to me. These are the real stories of real sisters, God willing, soon to be brothers too, who are finally home. And yet, we remember that after the wedding procession has passed, the funeral procession will be yet to come. Israel and Gaza somehow will need to rebuild, repair, and God willing, they will need to work towards something better than this. But knowing how tough the road ahead is can't stop us from having moments of joy right here and right now. Judaism has, shouldn't shock you too much, a long tradition of complicated celebrations like this, both mythic and historical. This week, we're in Parshat Vayera, which contains the second part of the story of our exodus from Egypt. The narrative, of course, begins by telling us how greatly the Israelites suffered in slavery, especially once Pharaoh commanded the Israelites that all male babies were to be killed. But in the midst of this all, the Midrashic tradition tells us that there was a divine celebration in Moses' house when he was born, that on the day of his birth, the house was filled with light. Want something more concrete and historical? Since 1923, Jews worldwide have taken part in a global study cycle of Talmud called Daf Yomi, if you know that name, reading a page a day of the 2,700 plus page collection of Talmud. That works out to be one full cycle of Talmud every 7.5 years or so. The end of the cycle is a major global cause of celebration. But let me do that math for you. The first cycle began in 1923. So yes, the end of the third cycle took place in 1945, in November to be more specific. And in the face of it all, in the bitter cold of a particular German DP camp, right after the war ended, you'd better believe there were Jews who weren't going to miss the opportunity to celebrate that occasion. In the words of an Auschwitz survivor who was there, we were only a few broken Jews with 2 books, but that day was my day of victory, the day of victory for all survivors, and the day of victory for every so-called Talmudic Jew. Well, trust me when I say it, you don't have to be a Talmudic Jew, whatever that is, to claim a celebration in the face of hardship. You only have to, for a moment, shift your frame of reference and fix your gaze on the good that happens to be right in front of you. And yes, by the way, for those of you who are eagle-eyed, this is not actually a photo of their celebration from this Talmud Siyum. This is them celebrating Passover. They got that photo, but they didn't snap one of the Siyum. Of course, we only just celebrated Hanukkah not too long ago, commemorating the end of a brutal struggle between the Hasmonean Judeans and the Seleucid Greek neighbors against whom they fought. There were babies born during the pogroms, and those were simchas. And even right in the middle of the Shoah, in the camps, there were weddings. Because our people has learned that if you defer celebration until the best of circumstances, you may never get to have it. So, that said, enough delay. We're going to toast to Romi, Emily, and Doron, to their health, to their redemption. That's why I've been singing a redemption song all evening. And to the release of every hostage, and of course, peace in Israel. So we're going to pass out, we are literally going to toast. We're going to pass out some little cups with sparkling cider, and we will have a l'chaim together.